Crayonville is a flip and write village builder that you play through multiple levels. So you start out with a fairly blank sheet like this, and then a couple of levels in, you will have a village looking something like that. And then by the end of it, you will have built a city that looks something like this. So each level plays in about 20 minutes for the first simple levels, and then as the game progresses, things get more complex. Each level might take 30 to 45 minutes to complete. So that means you will play multiple levels, a handful of them in one sitting, but most likely not the complete 10-level game. That makes it slightly a legacy style game where you keep your village from one game session to the next. Mechanics of expansion are fairly simple. So there's an action deck that you flip cards from, and in that deck there are expand cards. So whenever you draw an expand card, every player can perform an expand action on their territory. And that means each player draws a set of expansion tokens corresponding to the 4 different terrains you can draw, and you use your crayons to color in this terrain anywhere you would like in your territory. And also in the action deck are a bunch of harvest cards corresponding to the different terrains. So whenever a harvest card is flipped, every player will perform a harvest action. And the harvest action means that the houses you have built will harvest a particular type of resource from a particular type of terrain. So if you flip a wood harvest action, then your houses will harvest wood from every adjacent unoccupied wood space. Now, in addition to the actions in the action deck that everybody shares, each player also has their own personal build action card. The build card is yours to use whenever you want, which means you choose to build instead of performing the available expand or harvest action. So that's one of the most important choices in this game is when you choose to use your build action, because then you miss a standard turn of expansion or harvesting, but you get to build. So in the beginning, you build houses and boats that harvest resources. But as the game progresses, you will be building production buildings that can multiply your resources. You will build roads to connect your houses that increase their harvesting and production capacity. And in the later stages, you will be building guard towers, battleships, and city walls to encapsulate your city. So the build action is on the front of the card, and on the back side of the card is a produce action. So that means that when you use a build action, you flip the card around to its produce side. And that means you need to perform a produce action to flip the card back before you can build again. The produce action activates your production buildings, which will multiply any one of your resources that you have built a production building for. So how do you score points? Well, inside the action deck, there are a couple of feast cards that show up. So whenever a feast comes along, you need to feed your population, basically your houses. So if you're able to supply food to your houses, and food will be grain or fish, then you will score points. If you're not able to feed your houses, then you will not score points. In addition, there is a scoring action called the market, which is available to everyone all the time, but you need to choose to activate it. And in the same way as building, if you choose to call a market, you will effectively skip the next turn, meaning you won't be able to harvest or expand whatever comes up, in order to perform a market action instead. And the market action means allows you to sell one kind of resource to the market in order to score points. And the amount of resources you need to sell in order to score points is dependent on which level you're on. So in the later levels, you will be able to, you will need to produce more in order to sell more in order to score the same points. Oh, and I forgot to mention animals. At one point in the game, you will start to include animals and draw animals on your territory, sort of domesticated livestock, which introduce a new kind of resource called animal produce into the game, which is harvested along with other resources, but may be used obviously in the market, but also as food when feeding your population. And in the later stages of the game, there is also a scoring event called tax, which basically gives you points for the amount of buildings you have constructed. So the sort of the size of your city, your roads, your walls, everything you built will score you tax points, which also scores you points. So points are scored in every level, and then once the level ends, which happens when the action deck is depleted, then there will be some final scoring actions and events happening, and then you see which player has acquired the most points for that level. So each level there is a winner, and once you start the next level, everybody starts on 0 points again, so everybody has the same chance to win the next level. The great thing about this game is that it starts out simple and then teaches you to play the game gradually. There is a tutorial mode which introduces new concepts level by level. But experienced players can choose to start a level 1 game with the full set of rules if they want to. And also, players who prefer limited complexity can choose to play through 10 levels with the simple rule set, never introducing the more advanced concepts. Another good thing is the breakdown into levels, which means the game can be played in sort of bite-sized portions. You can play one level, 20 minutes, two levels, under an hour, and you can fill the entire night with levels if you like, or you can just play a couple of levels and then leave it for later. And each level will see all the players starting on more or less even footing, which means anybody can join and have fun regardless of how they performed in the previous levels. And like many flip and write games, it's something of a solitaire multiplayer experience, which means you can basically play with lots of people. There's no practical limit to the number of players who can join in. There is some interaction in terms of the markets and so forth, but you're mostly building your own city. That means also that the game plays very well as a pure solo game, as well as with other players.